I want to hear from you guys a little bit and make this as interactive as we can when it comes to reconciling. So my name is Sina Floyd. I will be teaching Reconciliations Can Be Accrual today. I'm a product owner and technical support specialist over at LiveRez. Justin.
I'm Justin Borchman, QA engineer at LiveRez.
Start at the front. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Yeah.
Kate, I'm from Cambridge.
What do you do, Kate?
I'm the bookkeeper.
Awesome. Great.
I'm Allison, and I'm with Country Club Properties Highlands, North Carolina.
Allison, do you just do the bookkeeping and accounting, or do you do more, don't you? Yeah, I was going to say, you do all of it.
Yeah.
You wear many hats.
My name is Max. I'm the compliance and accounting officer for Star Chase Cabins in East Tennessee.
I'm Trent from Palm Springs, California. I do bookkeeping and HR for Relax Palm Springs.
I'm Jeff from Key West Hideaways, and I do bookkeeping, a little bit of everything. But I'm in charge of it.
Adam Barr from Ascent Properties in New Scott, Montana.
I am Adam Straight, man, woman. My name's Sammy, but so I do a bunch of everything from this to the operations side. So.
Great.
I'm Michelle from Cascadera Vacation Rentals in Sunderberg, Oregon, and I am an operations manager, but also now starting.
Awesome. Are you super excited about that? Yeah, I was going to say, you sounded like maybe you were kind of excited about it. So who in here has done reconciliations before? Yeah, a little bit. What are you guys hoping to get out of the class? So I can make sure that I definitely cover that. We'll go through the initial and the monthlies, but is there anything specific you came here wanting answered so I can make sure I cover it?
Just want to see it go correct. Mine never goes correct.
Okay. All right, well, we will definitely cover the initial and we'll cover the monthly. And then for anyone who doesn't know, we are going to do a reconciliations roundtable after this. So if you want to pull up your specific account information or any bank account information, anything like that, and you want us to look at some specific things, we can do that also. So that might be a really great time to cover some of those things. All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. All right. So today we'll go ahead and cover the purpose and importance of reconciling, what you need and what you need to know when you are reconciling, the initial reconciliation and monthly reconciliations. Those are different things. Uncleared entries and troubleshooting, and then of course any questions. If you guys do have questions throughout the presentation though, please feel free to ask them. I don't want anybody forgetting anything. You can also write down your questions and wait to the end, whatever you prefer. Does anybody know if their account has the initial reconciliation done? No, maybe, no? Okay, great. All right, the purpose and importance of reconciling. Okay, first of all, it keeps your Live Trust cash account in balance with your bank account. So it's actually really important to get that done. So basically what happens when we import you into Live Trust at the beginning of your Live Trust adventure, what it does is it pulls in all of the payment information from any reservation that is in your reservation system. However, it doesn't pull in anything from your bank account. So what the reconciliation does is when you open up your bank account and say these entries took place and you match them with your entries in Live Trust, it's making sure that the same things are happening in both places. And then if there's anything that's happening in Live Trust that doesn't happen in your bank account or vice versa, reconciling will catch that. So that is why reconciling is 1000% one of the most important things you can do when it comes to your accounting software. A little bit of a case study, and if you guys have been in the accounting classes, you may have heard Dina with ASAP say this as well. She was working with a partner, and they hadn't reconciled in a very long time, and they were actually missing thousands of dollars in money because an OTA had incorrect direct deposit information on file for them. So they just weren't depositing money into their bank account, and they would have never known if they hadn't done reconciliations because the reconciliation will identify if something is not happening in one place or the other. So it's extremely important to make sure that you reconcile. And then on top of that, it will identify any of your uncleared items that you need to research. So any uncleared items are going to be things that happen in your Live Trust account that don't actually happen in your bank account that you need to go in and kind of look for and make sure that you get those cleared up. And we'll dive into those a little bit more also, but that's kind of the reason that you need to make sure that you are reconciling to keep everything in balance. What do you need? You guys, what I love about reconciling is you don't need much. You need your bank statement. You should really only need one bank statement. Your live trust account should be in sync with one bank account. So most companies will have a trust bank account that's kind of set up to match with their reservation system. So any deposits you get from your credit card processor or your OTAs, those will go into one bank account, and that should match with your live trust. And then usually you'll have an operating bank account also. So you want to make sure when you're reconciling that you have your bank statement, and then you will need that for your trust account. And then you'll also want to make sure that you have any logins or emails for any account that group deposits can come from, which is normally going to be OTAs and your credit card processor. So depending on your role in the company and what you do, you may actually have login information for each of those different OTAs and your credit card processing company. If not, normally you can set up emails for that also. And so you kind of get regular emails saying, hey, we deposited money into your account, and it was for these items. So you can go in later and then group those in live trust. It's going to be a really important step to reconciliations. Sometimes people will have more than one bank account that they try to tie into live trust. That is very complicated and kind of convoluted. If any of you do have that, let's talk afterwards and we can kind of discuss that further, and we'll discuss that with ASAB and breaking those out. What do you need? You guys, other than your bank statement, you pretty much have what you need in front of you. A pen and a highlighter. And I put a Sharpie up here because realistically, if you want one to make other notes, you can have it. But really all you need is a pen and a highlighter. That's all I use when I do reconciliations. It keeps it pretty straightforward. You don't really need a calculator or anything like that unless you just want to do some math on the fun side because you love it. All right, what do you need to know in order to reconcile? You will want to make sure, oh, I'm sorry, that's a good one. Great. Okay, sometimes people think that they need a lot of accounting knowledge, but that's not actually the case. So what you want to make sure that you know is that you know how to make group deposits and how to make adjustments. And that's really all you need to know in order to reconcile, and then you'll go through and you'll check items off. So we'll go ahead and we'll cover how to do each one of these things. Okay, so group deposits. One, why should you group payments and refunds together? So like I was saying, credit card payments and OTA payments are often deposited into your bank account as group deposits. That's not how they come into the live res system. So if you were to, on a Friday, say make 4 or 5 reservations, and they're all credit card payments, right? Let's say they're all $1,000. What that's going to look like in live trust is 4 $1,000 payments that come into your cash account. However, your credit card processing company will probably give you a group deposit or a batch deposit of $4,000. So when you print out your bank statement, you're going to see $4,000, but your live trust cash account is going to show 4 $1,000 entries. So what you do in live trust is you go and you group those together, then it matches with your bank statement. It's very pretty that way. So we'll go ahead and we'll cover how to do that and what that looks like in the system as well. All right. Do you guys have any questions so far? No? Okay. There will be a quiz later. There's not going to be a quiz later. All right, how to group deposits. So from the cash account, you're going to go ahead and just select the deposit entries to group. Can you guys see that screenshot okay? If not, I can also pull up the live trust system later. You see it okay? Okay, cool. And then if you guys are on your computer and you need help getting to this area, just let me know and I can direct you there too. So the cash account is the little $sign over on the left-hand side. And once you're there, as soon as you select multiple entries, you'll be able to click on New Deposit Group at the top. Once you do that, you're going to have the option to enter a deposit group date as well as deposit group notes. Deposit group notes, you can put anything you want in there. A lot of what I normally see is going to be like VRP deposit, Lynbrook deposit, Verbo deposit, kind of identifying what and where that deposit came from. That is an optional field. Deposit group date is not optional. All right, so let's say you've made this beautiful deposit group and it was for 2 $500 entries, but then you realize that you grouped the wrong entries. No worries, luckily we have an edit button. This is new as of, I think, 2 years ago. And it is beautiful. You only used to be able to cancel a group deposit, and that was very, very difficult because a lot of times you'll be grouping 10 items, and it might be over a week's worth of time if it's a group lump sum from an OTA. Now that you can edit it, you can click on Edit, select one item to remove or select an additional item to add, and then just save the group deposit. So it makes it really, really easy to go in and edit them. That's very important. I use that button probably way too much, but all the time. It's also very valuable when you're doing group deposits to know that sometimes you will need to backdate a single deposit, and you will do that by grouping it. The reason backdating deposits happen is usually if it's going to be like a payment from an OTA that comes in on the 1st of the month into your reservation system for any reason, but it maybe hit your bank account on the 31st of the month. So any disconnect like that, which almost always happens at the end of the month between the 1st and the 31st or 30th, whatever the last day is, in order to get it to populate on your reconciliation, you need to make sure that it has a date within your reconciliation time frame. So you can go in and backdate a single deposit by just selecting it, grouping it as a single, and then putting a date whenever you need it on there. So that one's pretty straightforward. Any questions on grouping deposits? Why you would need to do it, or yeah?
I have someone else that does some of the grouping for me for our OTAs, and when I do the reconciliation, sometimes it's like you said, it'll hit the bank account on the 31st, or maybe the other way around, but it's already grouped on a date, like in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe on the 1st or 2nd, but it hit the bank account on the 31st. So how do I've tried to edit it and change the date, but it doesn't take. So what I've had to do is just end up taking them all out of that group and then going back and finding them again with the new date as a new group.
Sure. I've seen something like that before. Have you tried taking one out instead of taking all of them out and saving it? Yeah. So I get what you're saying. You've done the group already, and it's for a specific date, but you just want to edit the date, and it's not allowing you to do it without actually making a change to the group deposit. You should be able to do that. I've actually run into that situation. If you click on Edit and you just remove the most recent transaction, the one that's closest to the date you're trying to do, if you remove that one and then save it and then just click on Edit again and click that one single entry, it'll let you backdate it, yeah. So that way you don't have to deselect all of them, because I know that can be a real headache. So, yep, will you make a note of that though? I want to make sure that they're able to edit a deposit and just change the date on that. But yeah, that should work for you. Any other questions on grouping, how to? All right. If anybody has done reconciliations before and they have best practices, there are a couple of different ways you can do things, so please feel free to share with the group also. Yeah?
I have a question just because
Of course.
I'm not fully live. Sorry, not fully live in Live Trust yet.
Oh, okay.
Is there a way that we can do an adjustment in with the deposit when we group a deposit, or does it only take deposits?
Nope. Okay, so you can do adjustments with it. So anything that hits the cash account, you can group deposit. So that's going to be any payments that are taken on reservations, any refunds to a reservation, any deposit that you enter into Live Trust directly, that affects the cash account. An adjustment as long as one of the fields that you're entering it to.
Specifically for
Yep.
processing.
As long as the debit or credit field on an adjustment is the cash account, you'll be able to group it. So like you can do an adjustment from an owner to a manager. That won't hit your cash account, and therefore you can't include it as part of a group. But if you do an adjustment that affects the cash account, then you can. Do you have a question on that?
No, I don't think I got it.
I'm gonna say you look pensive.
Just working through the steps of how to
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, so there's 6 different things that impact your cash account. It's going to be payments, refunds, checks, disbursements, bill payments, and adjustments. So anything that hits the cash account, you can group deposit. Any other questions on group deposits? Those were great. All right. Adjustments. So adjustments can affect your cash account if you need them to. A couple common scenarios that you're going to have and that you're going to need to enter adjustments for every month are going to be bank interest. If you get interest from your bank, you'll need to go ahead and enter that, and that's something you'll have to enter every month. Any bank fees if you have them, or to clear any uncleared entries from your initial reconciliation. So one of the things that we're going to go through next is how to complete an initial reconciliation, which you will need to do if you're just onboarding to Live Trust when you do your initial reconciliation. And when you do that, you're going to clear off a whole bunch of items from your kind of cash account backlog. If for any reason you accidentally clear something that you shouldn't have cleared and you don't find it out until 2 months later, you'll enter an adjustment to fix that. Something that I put on a sticky note that is always on my computer: debit cash and credit a stakeholder, it's inflow to your bank account, and that also will show as income into your cash account. Debit stakeholder and credit cash, outflow from your bank account, outflow from the stakeholder that you're doing it to. So I've literally had that same sticky note on my computer, I think, for 4 years. So if you take anything away, that one's a really big one. And all of these slides will be available in our help center. I think we're going to put them in our help center later. So if you need to reference back, that's a great one. And there are some like sticky notes on your thing too. So you have lots of those. All right, any questions on kind of what you need to know, what you need to do, the basics in Live Trust before we move on to the initial reconciliation? Fantastic. All right, so it sounded like mostly everybody has had a reconciliation in their account. Does anybody know if they have no reconciliations in their trust account yet in Live Trust? No reconciliations yet? Perfect. This section, falling on you guys. There may be a couple items from here if you have already done some reconciliations, but you have some uncleared transactions that to refer back to. This is probably where they came from, depending on how old they are. Great, this slide is going to look really confusing, but it's actually pretty straightforward and a really easy way to find this calculated balance from the beginning. So the initial reconciliation is different from your monthly reconciliations because you're trying to get your Live Trust account in balance with your bank account, but Live Trust has a 0 beginning balance at it at the time. So this is going to be when you're doing your initial reconciliation, the only time that you will make an adjustment to kind of cover a lump sum of money that gets your reconciliations in the right spot. So please remember that when you are doing your monthly reconciliations, do not do random adjustments that did not occur in your bank account. That is always going to be something that happened in your bank account. The only time you're going to do an adjustment to get things on track is your initial reconciliation. It's very important to remember. So when you did your Live Trust import, or when you do your Live Trust import, like I was saying, it's going to take all of your reservations data from a specific start date. So let's say we started in January 2021, and you want any reservation that departed starting January 2021 to be in Live Trust going forward. What that import's going to do is any payments or refunds that were on those reservations are now going to be in your Live Trust account. That could be for the last 365 days, the whole last year of payments and refunds showing in your account. So unless you're going to go through and do reconciliations and enter all those through all those times, you're going to want to do an initial reconciliation that clears out all of those items that should have been reconciled in past accounting systems. So that's what the initial reconciliation does. It clears out all of the data from the last year, so you don't have to go back through and keep track of that. It kind of just takes care of it, and that should have been reconciled if you're reconciling in your last accounting software. All right. So the beginning balance, it is your advance deposits, which are any of the payments taken on reservations, and then any owner balances that you add into Live Trust, whether those be positive or negative, and then any uncleared transactions. So for example, if you wrote a check for a vendor on December 31st, but they're not going to cash it till January, that would be something that you enter when you're doing your initial reconciliation. Like I said, there is a quick way to find it. I have a screenshot of it, and I'll show you a really, really fast way to find the adjustment you're going to make for that. When you do your initial reconciliation, ultimately the manager is going to be responsible for the health of the account. So if whether it be a positive or a negative number, which we'll cover a little bit further here in a sec, that's either money that comes back to the manager or money that the manager needs to be responsible for. So depending on what your accounting has been to date, you may have a really, really small adjustment number. If it hasn't been great, I've had a lot of companies that see a very large adjustment number. They end up owing a lot of money to the trust account. So ideally, we're going to see a 0 number, but we'll cover that some more too. If you haven't been doing a lot of reconciliations up to this point, and you're not a new company, you've been around for a while, but you're kind of like, I'm not really sure the health of my account and how Live Trust is going to match my bank account. Some people will actually create a vendor instead of doing adjustments to and from the manager statement. They feel like that starts to get a little messy. They can't go back and track it as easily because as the months go on, you start seeing your reservation inflow and outflow and different expenses on your manager statement. Some people want to keep those separate, so they will create like a beginning balance vendor or a clearing vendor, and they will enter anything that has to do with reconciliations onto that vendor statement. Makes it just a little easier to go back and track or run reports from or anything like that if they decide to do that. So depending on the size of your system and how clean your accounting has been to date, that may be something to consider. I've seen that work really well for some people. If you do that, it's very important to remember not to forget about that vendor. If that vendor is in the negative, you need to make sure that you do an adjustment from your manager account to that vendor to cover the balance. And same thing for if it's positive. You know, if it ends up that you had more money in your bank account than LiveTrust was showing, that money could be due to the manager. So realistically, your clearing vendor, if it does not immediately go to zero from your accounting standpoint, you will want to eventually get it there. Or if you start doing your bank fees and interest payments from there, you'll want to make sure to transfer the money from the either to or from your manager statement at the end of every month also. So that's an option that some people make work really well. We can cover that further. Any questions on the differences between an initial, a monthly? You don't do any of this. No? All right. So this is the flow of the initial reconciliation. And I'm sorry, you guys, I feel like those words are really tiny, so I will read them. So the first thing you're going to do when you do your initial reconciliation is you're going to go ahead and add in any deposits or payments from previous months utilizing adjustments and disbursements to get stakeholder balances correct. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to that example of we imported you for any reservation departing January 1st going forward. Okay, so what that's going to look like for an owner, for example, is that they're not going to have any data. They'll probably have a zero balance to begin with at the end of December. But that may not be realistic. Maybe that owner had a $200 balance. They had a reserve amount or anything like that. You'll want to make sure that you get those balances added into your LiveTrust account. So you'll want to make sure that you add in any owner balances as well as any vendor balances if you do have them, or if there was any money hanging out in the manager account, you'll want to get that added as well. And then you're going to group. So once again, we just did a big old import. Any credit card payments usually that come in at the end of a month sometimes will not hit your bank account until the first or second of a following month. So if you take a reservation on like a Saturday, you'll enter that payment into LiveRes, but it may not hit your bank account until later. So you'll want to go ahead and make sure that you group any of those because we will leave those unclear during the initial reconciliation so we can clear them later. Then you'll go ahead and get started. So for your first reconciliation, you'll want to choose the month end just prior to your start date and then enter the correct date and ending balance. I have a screenshot on the next slide that shows you what this looks like. But basically, you pick a day when you're going to start your monthly reconciliations. So in the example I've been giving of starting on January, your first monthly reconciliation will take place in January. That's the bank statement you'll print out. That's where you will start matching apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and making sure everything looks good. So for your first reconciliation, it will be December 31st, the previous month, to there. And then you'll enter that ending bank balance for that. Then you'll go through, you'll clear all of your transactions that are in the cash account that are not going to be on any future bank statements. So all of those entries that I said could be outstanding from the past 365 days. You'll clear all of them if they're not going to clear later on a future bank statement. Something that helps with that is having, if you've done reconciliations, is having the bank statement or your previous reconciliation from your accounting system for that month and then for the next month if it's available. And then you enter in one adjustment, hopefully a small one, but sometimes it does end up being large, against your manager clearing account. And we are going to go through kind of what that looks like step by step with some pictures. So when you start your initial reconciliation, it's going to say that you've never reconciled. It'll have a zero balance. You'll enter your statement date and your statement ending balance from that time. And then just click on continue there. If you have your laptops open and you're following along with that, it's also in your cash account, so it's a little $sign on the left-hand side. All right, and so what you're going to do from there is you're going to go ahead and just select any item that isn't going to clear in the future. So you will have some unselected items as well. In this example that I have up here, you can see that I made some disbursements to owner accounts that happened on the 31st of December, but they were checks and those owners haven't cashed them yet. So they are going to go ahead and clear in a future month. And so you can also see up here that there's a difference. So remember when I gave you that big old formula and I was like, if you take these numbers and these numbers and these numbers and you add them all together, it gives you that difference. So it does do it for you. So little cheat sheet right there. If you do your initial reconciliation, that difference number is going to be the adjustment that you enter during your initial reconciliation. All right. When you enter that adjustment, I see this happen a lot, where people do not actually backdate the adjustment to the correct date. So they enter it, and they think they didn't, and then they go and they enter it again. And then 6 months down the line, they see this huge adjustment randomly in their account. So just make sure that you backdate it appropriately for your initial adjustment. And then if it's a positive difference, which is better than a negative difference, you're going to debit cash and credit the stakeholder. That means that there's money due to your management account, which can be good. Ideally, we still want it to be a low number. In my example, it's quite high, but you want it to be a low number. A negative difference, you debit your stakeholder and credit cash. The reason I'm saying stakeholder is if you used a clearing vendor, it may be a vendor account versus the manager account. But that would mean that money is actually due from your management account. So you need to actually put money back into the bank account to make it balance correctly. A low difference or no difference is ideal. If you've been reconciling to date and you're just switching accounting systems, ideally, there won't be any difference that you're going to see there. However, I think the lowest one I've seen has been like a couple of dollars, so it's pretty rare that somebody has no difference existing. All right, so after you go in and you enter that adjustment, you're actually just going to come back into your reconciliation. Anytime you're in your reconciliation, if you back out of it, it will save it. If you click pause, it will save it. So as long as you don't cancel it, it'll still be here. But you come back in, you'll see that that adjustment is now added, and you will select it. Your difference will be 0. You can reconcile now, and that completes your initial reconciliation. This one does take a little bit of time, so keep that in mind that this takes a little bit because there's a lot of research that can happen trying to make sure that you don't clear too many items because that will cause you issues later. So it's worth it to put in a little bit more time up front for this one. Yeah?
How far back would you recommend going?
It kind of depends on if you've been reconciling in a different account. So if you have been up to date on reconciliations in your past accounting program, then I would say pretty much just pick up where you left off. If that's not the case, I would say go back to when you're going to import your data because you can't go back much further than that, to be honest, without doing a lot of entries. So for example, in this specific scenario, we did our import as of January 1st, 2021. Is that the word? 2021. So I would start there with my monthly reconciliations. So my initial would be through December 31st. For some people who come onto Live Trust and it's maybe like February or March, they will sometimes go back to January if they want to try and do like a full accounting year. It's not necessary. Normally you will just do the previous month before you start your monthlies.
Well, to simplify 1099s, you're considering doing it starting in January 2022. So would that make sense to do that?
You're going to do your import into Live Trust January 2022? Yes, I almost always suggest, if you can, depending on where you are in the year, that you do an import, a January import. So yeah, yep. So if you're importing January 2022, Jan 1, your initial reconciliation would be through December 31st, 2021. Yep. Any other questions on the initial reconciliation? Okay, if anybody does want to walk through their initial later, it is one we can help with and do some more one-on-one information on it. Right, we're going to go ahead and jump into monthly reconciliations. So like I said, monthly reconciliations, they're a little different than your initial reconciliation because you should not do an adjustment to try and make things balance. Anything that happens on your monthly reconciliations should match your bank account. So if there's anything that you have to do outside of that, that's usually a good time to get an accountant involved, make sure you're doing everything you need to and not just like throwing random adjustments in to make things match. That's not the purpose of a reconciliation. So you want to make sure that every entry is going to be in there. The only exception to that I will say is a $0 group deposit, which does sometimes happen. I see those if somebody accidentally adds like an other payment type to a reservation and they're like, oh, I meant to charge that as a credit card, and they refund it, you'll want to go into your cash account. Those create a zero group deposit, or you just select them at the same time, and you won't necessarily always see those in your bank account. But anything of value, you want to make sure that it's happening in your bank account also. Any questions on $0 group deposits? I don't touch those a lot, but they do sometimes come up in people's accounts. I also see them sometimes if someone is covering a Verbo fee. They'll enter in the Verbo fee on the transaction, then enter an adjustment in Live Trust to compensate for it, and they have a lot of $0 group deposits. All right, frequency. You should do your monthly reconciliations at least monthly. If you have a larger accounting software or a system, you may want to do it more often. You can do them every week. Bank statements usually have a breakdown of balances kind of throughout the month. So you can do them more often, and that might be easier if you have a lot of inflow or a lot of outflow coming in and out of your account. You know, you wouldn't want to be, you wouldn't want to accidentally push cancel on a reconciliation or anything, which some of us have done before, and then have to start over. So sometimes doing them weekly, or you do them bi-monthly or something like that is really valuable. But you should at least do them once a month. Very important. All right, how to do the monthly reconciliation. I suggest printing your bank statement. I really do. You don't have to. Maybe if you only have a couple of entries, but I'm gonna like to think that everybody has way more than a couple of entries, you wouldn't have to print it, but I strongly suggest printing your bank statement. It's what the pens and highlighters are for. It makes it a lot easier to go in and actually like check things off, highlight anything that's not appearing. You know what to research. I've tried reconciling before where you just pull it up and it's really hard to remember just off the top of your head what happened and what didn't. So highly suggest printing your bank statement. So you're going to go ahead and print that off, and then you're going to group your deposits like we discussed before. You want to make sure that you group any bank deposits and any OTA deposits. And that is something that you can do throughout the month if you want to. I like to just go in and do them all at once, kind of at the end. But it is something you can do throughout the month. Like I said, you can set up automatic emails that come to you every time an email comes in. If you want to stop what you're doing and go in and group those, that's an option. But doing it at month's end is my preference. It also kind of depends on, you know, the time you have allowed. If you're sitting there for 5 minutes and you can go in and do a couple of groups, go ahead. But you want to make sure that you do it before you actually start reconciling. Otherwise, what you're going to run into is you'll have a bank statement in front of you, and you'll realize you really can't check anything off because you haven't done your grouping yet. You're going to want to go ahead and enter your adjustments. So that's going to be any bank fees, interest earned, or anything that happened in your bank account that didn't happen in Live Trust. This should be pretty minimal for the most part. Most of what you want to see between your bank account and Live Trust is going to be reservation payments or refunds, payments to vendors or payments to owners, things like that. So anything that's going to happen in Live Trust that you've entered into Live Trust. Some things that might happen in your bank account if you haven't documented them yet in Live Trust would be if you do a transfer from your bank account to your operating account or something. You always want to make sure that you're adding that onto your manager's statements, that you're tracking that so you're not pulling out too much. But I have seen some of those things happen before they document them in Live Trust, so try and stay on top of the Live Trust documentation for anything that you're doing straight from your bank account. So try and stay on top of that. It will help you at the end of the month. And after that, you'll go ahead and you will start reconciling. So I would say grab a pen and a highlighter and get started. All right, how to do your monthly reconciliation, step by step. So a lot of these screenshots are going to look pretty similar because they're very similar to what we just saw on the initial reconciliation. So you're going to go ahead and click on reconciliation in your cash account. Again, cash account's the little $sign on the left-hand side. But what you're going to see at your monthly reconciliations is you will have your last reconciliation date and your beginning balance. One of the things that is really nice about reconciliations is if for any reason you do mess up on your initial one, no big deal. You can undo it pretty easily. But let's just assume we're moving forward with it. You're going to go ahead and enter your statement date and your statement ending balance. Once again, that should be at least monthly, but you can enter whatever statement date you need to. If you decide you had, a lot of transactions, you can do that in the middle of the month also. But you'll want to go ahead and enter your statement ending balance and then click continue. So once you've done that, you're pretty much just going to go through your bank statement and look at Live Trust, and you're going to check off the items that occurred and check the little cleared box until your difference equals 0. That's reconciling, you guys. I know, that's fun. I would like to say that it's really easy to get to 0 and that it happens all the time first time out of the gate, but it's usually not the case. Sometimes there's going to be something that happens on your bank statement that you have to research. You may have to do an adjustment for it. Oftentimes what happens is someone will think they paid a vendor, but their check is actually sitting in queued checks in Live Trust. So sometimes there's going to be some things that you need to research. And that happens. It takes a little bit of time, but the more you do it, the easier it'll be to get to your difference of 0. Then once it hits 0, you can go ahead and reconcile now, and your reconciliation will be complete. One of the things that I like to do when I'm reconciling is you can click on that credit and debit column that you see at the top there. Usually I will organize by that. So instead of trying to, because when a bank statement's organized, it's organized by your credits and your debits. It's not by like the date, normally it's not by like the date of which everything happened and then they're all over the place like that. So I organize by debit or credit, and then I just start from the top and I look for the amounts on the bank statement. So I do it that way. But like I said, to each their own. If you want to do it by date and that works for you, great. I just highly suggest marking off on the paper. Once you mark something off in Live Trust, it'll help you with tracking. And then if for any reason there's something on the paper that's not here, highlight it. All right, uncleared entries and troubleshooting. Before we move on to this section, does anybody have questions on the monthly reconciliation? All right, great. Okay, uncleared entries and troubleshooting. So when you get your reconciliation all done, your difference is down to 0, you're able to reconcile, that's fantastic. You've done all your research. But what you're usually going to see, it's very common and it's normal to have uncleared entries. So your uncleared entries, they are going to be at the bottom of your reconciliation report. It'll say uncleared transactions on it. And what you're expecting to see here is anything usually made at the end of a month that just isn't going to clear until the next month. So that's very normal. You know, if you pay out your owners on the 31st and it's a check, or maybe you didn't do the ACH transfer for a few days or whatever that looks like, you're going to want to clear those in the next month. Like I said, perfectly normal. You'll probably see some group deposits here, some payments from credit cards here also, but you're normally going to see something towards the end of the month. So what uncleared entries are, if it's anything that goes past that end of the month time frame, is it's an entry that happened in Live Trust but just isn't on your bank statement hopefully yet, but it could be something that's in Live Trust. It's never going to happen on your bank statement, and that's going to be something that you're going to want to make sure that you research, because they do throw your cash account and your bank statement out of balance. Right, so what do you want to do if you have an uncleared entry? Like I said, it's normal to have some, not normal to have some in these situations. So normally what you're going to see is an internal credit. If you have an internal credit uncleared entry, you should try clearing those immediately. You will use an internal credit sometimes in the reservation system if maybe a guest had a bad experience with something and you're like, hey, I'm going to cover $100 of your reservation, but you still want the owner to be paid out in full. You refund them, you had a $100 internal credit. You need to do an adjustment for that. Every internal credit that happens in the reservation system, you need to do a Live Trust adjustment for it. That's how internal credits were made to be used. So if you see internal credits, chances are you just didn't do an adjustment for it in Live Trust. You'll need to make sure and get that done. And those, depending on your business practices, that adjustment could come from the owner or from the manager account. So if you guys have any questions on that, on specific use cases for your business, let me know. We can cover those and how those would look too. But those should clear in the same month that you add an internal credit. Those should not linger into multiple months. Deposits and credit card refunds. So deposit would be a payment that comes onto a reservation. Those should clear by the next reconciliation. There shouldn't really be a time where a credit card payment is taken on the 31st, but it doesn't clear for 30 days into your bank account. That's not really normal. I'd probably reach out to your credit card processor if that does occur. Something that you might see is an OTA if they're holding funds for any reason. There have been times where I know that I think Airbnb does this. If you have like too many cancellations and refunds, they won't pay you out for new payments that come in until you're back in like the positive. So you might see that with some OTAs where they hold out releasing funds, but it shouldn't be for a very long time. Or credit card processors, if they fund an event, you might see payments into your Live Trust account that don't come into your bank account until they're funded from the credit card processor. But for the most part, you're going to see those clear in the next month. For any checks that you write out of Live Trust or out of your trust account, your trust bank account, 90 days is a pretty good rule of thumb for that. If you write someone a check and they haven't cashed it for 90 days, it's probably a good idea to follow up with them and say, hey, please cash that check so I can move on. Or hopefully they didn't lose it, but maybe they lost the check and you need to make an adjustment, reprint it, whatever that looks like. But checks really shouldn't go more than 90 days without being looked into. If you can't explain an entry at all, an uncleared entry, you will probably have to do an adjustment to counteract it. So that sometimes will have to happen. Normally, if that's going to happen, it might be something that is lingering from your initial reconciliation. So that might happen. If unclear transactions that are not caught up with, they can be extremely time consuming. There are some accounts where they have uncleared transactions that are like 6 to 8 months old, sometimes even a little bit longer than that. To try and go back and research something that far in the past is really, really, really difficult. And then to try and ask someone, do you remember what happened 1 week ago, let alone 6 months ago, usually doesn't jog their memory very well. So definitely try and keep up with any unclear transactions if you can. Then once again, if it's a result of your initial reconciliation, if you used your clearing account as a vendor, you would just do an additional adjustment there. Those are usually a little easier to identify because those unclear transactions will have a date next to them that is back before your monthly reconciliation started. So you'll be able to identify those ones. All right, other common scenarios. Payment on a reservation that is not in the cash account yet. So you want to go ahead and check and see if your reservation completes before your import date. So sometimes someone will see a payment on a reservation and like, oh, I'm not seeing it over here, but it turns out that reservation actually took place before the import date. So I mentioned earlier if we do an import of like January 1st, but maybe your reservation stayed before that, but then the payment came in later to your account as a weekend reservation. Right over that time, it can happen where it's not in your trust account, but it is in your reservation system and does pop up on a reconciliation. You can do an adjustment to enter those in. If a group deposit is missing from a reconciliation, you can check and see if the group deposit date is after your reconciliation date. So when you go in and reconcile, it only pulls in entries from your cash account up to the date that you entered. So it's not like you can see everything in your cash account and just pick and choose from there. It has a cutoff. So sometimes you'll notice that. What is really nice is that you can edit a reconciliation date and ending balance, so you do not have to cancel the entire reconciliation. You can go in and just edit those and adjust. Transactions created before the start date that aren't showing. So checks that were written before the start date that don't clear until after the start date, once again, those should have been included with your initial beginning balance. They do oftentimes get missed, so you will have to enter those later and then write off against them, usually with an adjustment. Any questions on uncleared entries? Scenarios that may pop up, utilizing internal credits? No? You guys, we're wrapping up here pretty quickly. Oh, actually, we're not. It's 2:50. We're doing pretty good. Are you sure you do not have any questions on reconciliations up to this point? Okay, I will talk to all of you soon because I'm sure you will probably pop one up when you print out your bank statement. We are going to go ahead and do a reconciliations roundtable after this. If anybody does want to print off a bank statement, they have that by their side and want to look into some specific questions. If you want to email it to me in a PDF, I can go ahead and try and get those printed so we can look into really some specifics for you. If you guys want to stay for that, we can also start doing that now. We have about 10 minutes left, so if you guys want to hang out, look at some things, think of any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, no problem. I don't know if you stopped recording now. I'm going to take this off. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate your time, and if you have any questions on reconciling,